you surprised we're not seeing much in terms of opposition from the Guard or anyone else for that matter? You know, sporadic, opposition here and there, but certainly nothing considerable, and certainly nothing of the aerial sort.
Well, remember, Neil, in the last couple of weeks, intelligence indicated that he had pulled his main units back to Baghdad.
Right.
He was going to fight from the boundaries and the borders and the crossroads of Baghdad. The units that have been put out have been ragtag, not well trained, very demoralized, and those are the ones that are giving up now. But as we close in on Baghdad, we may see more defense than we thought. But on the other hand, with all the psychological operations we're doing, we may see that Special Republican Guard really break down very quickly and give up as well. So that's the best case scenario. The fight now is towards Baghdad and the fall of the regime within Baghdad within the next 48 hours.
All right, General Paul Vallely, thank you very much. I want to go to the USS Kitty Hawk right now, where you'll find our James Furlong. James, what's the latest there?
Well, the first wave of attack aircraft from the USS Kitty Hawk has left. I understand that they have been supporting US and British Marines on the ground around Basra. They've also been supporting American Army units near the Iraqi towns of Khalil and Nazreen. They've also been acting in support of Australian special forces who are on the ground in southern Iraq. They've also been Prowler aircraft. These are electronic warfare aircraft. They've been operating around the Baghdad area in support of airstrikes there. So the first wave has gone, but also, of course, a lot of Tomahawk cruise missiles, 120 we understand from this region in the first wave, but there will be some 310 being launched. Now, that's as many as were launched during the entire 1991 Gulf War. So it gives you some idea of the magnitude of airstrikes that are being launched from ships in the Persian Gulf, in the Red Sea, and also in the Mediterranean.
So, James, from what I can imagine now, it's a little past midnight your time, so you still got another five and a half hours where you could continue hitting Baghdad. Is that the plan throughout the night, to do this in waves?
Well, I can't, for reasons of operational security, tell you exactly how long the aircraft are going to be leaving the ship and heading towards southern Iraq and for the Baghdad area. But I can tell you that they're going to be going for some hours yet. I spoke to some of those pilots on the F-14 Tomcats before they left. It's what they've been trained to do. I think I would describe the mood as one of grim determination, and the admiral in charge of the carrier battle group said tonight that these strikes will continue. There won't be any respite. They have the ability and they have the munitions to keep this up for as long as the mission lasts. And certainly those munitions that we've seen today in the Kitty Hawk are extensive and considerable. More than 100 2,000-pound bombs, among those 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs. And they can travel more than 100 feet under the ground before detonating, because intelligence tells the U.S. Navy and the military that that's the sort of death that some of the Iraqi presidential bunkers and Iraqi command elite bunkers are located at.
All right, James Furlong, thank you very much, aboard the USS Kitty Hawk. Let's put some of this in perspective before we go to Wendell Goler at the White House. Just among the cities hit today, you've heard a great deal of focus on Baghdad. I don't know if we can show a map yet of the region, but just to put it in perspective, Kirkuk, that's the key oil hub. That's where there was the heaviest of fighting. That's where we lost an American Marine. Qasr, the southern port city that is now under the coalition control, and Basra and Mosul, that's the northern city that we saw a few hundred Iraqi troops surrender. So this is not, even though we're showing you Baghdad, this is not just the sole purpose here of these widespread attacks. While the attention certainly is on Baghdad, and again, most of the firepower has been concentrated on Baghdad, now you're getting an idea of how widespread this is. And with Turkey now opening up its airspace for U.S. planes to continue to hit in the north, you get the idea very, very quickly, and this is something we're going to be talking to Captain David Christian about very shortly, that this is the focus of sort of encircling Baghdad and then ultimately bringing the war to a close, maybe in very short order. Wendell Goler now with the latest from the North Lawn of the White House. I would imagine, Wendell, the White House has got to be pretty pleased by the pace of developments thus far?
Well, you won't hear them say more than the president is confident and that the servicemen and women are doing an excellent job. They don't want to talk about the pace. They're continuing to stress that this could be a long war, that there could be casualties, and that the president is determined to see it through to disarm Saddam Hussein. Mr. Bush and the First Lady right now at Camp David. They will be spending the weekend there. The president will convene his war cabinet from Camp David tomorrow. It's likely National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld, CIA Director Tenet will join him there. Other members of the War Cabinet to be linked up by secure teleconference, including probably General Tommy Franks, the man directing the fight from the Persian Gulf. Officials here say that the president can do pretty much anything from Camp David that he can do from the White House. He might as well be in the Situation Room. Press Secretary Ari Fleischer asked a lot about the president's involvement in the war effort in his briefing today. He said Mr. Bush, of course, signed off on the war plan, but is leaving it up to his commanders to determine the timing of the attacks. The president is supervising matters, but Fleischer says the president believes the best way to win is to let the experts do the job. Fleischer also says that despite the compelling live pictures coming out of Baghdad, the president is not glued to his television, as is much of the rest of the nation. Fleischer says that he was with the president in the Oval Office when the heavy bombardment of Baghdad began. Mr. Bush was not looking at a television at that time, though Fleischer didn't rule out him perhaps flipping on a set after Fleischer left the Oval Office. He said, "I don't know that the president needs to watch TV," these are Ari Fleischer's words, "to understand what it means to authorize military force and to know that the mission has begun and the mission is underway." Now, earlier today, the president met with the Republican and Democratic leaders of the House and Senate, urged them to keep focused on the domestic agenda, thanked them, the leaders of the House at least, for passing a budget resolution last night and his $700+ billion economic stimulus package. Leaders also got a classified briefing of the war effort from Defense Secretary Rumsfeld, which the president then summarized in declassified form for a pool of reporters. He said, "We're making progress. We will stay on task until we've achieved our objective, which is to rid Iraq of weapons of mass destruction and free the Iraqi people so they can live in a society that is hopeful and democratic and at peace in its neighborhood." Finally, Neil, folks here aren't shedding much light on these reports that Saddam Hussein might have been killed in Wednesday's or injured in Wednesday's decapitation attack, the first, if you will, shots fired in this war. Though Fleischer said the CIA has determined that it is likely Saddam Hussein on the videotape that was broadcast to the Iraqi people on Thursday. Now, that's not to say that the tape wasn't made days ago, and it's not to say that Saddam Hussein didn't make a number of those tapes to be broadcast in the days ahead. But some of the people who had said that Saddam Hussein was likely killed or injured in the attack had cited as part of their evidence a claim that his former mistress says that was a body double on that tape. The CIA has determined that's not the case. Neil?
Or they could just interview the mistress, I guess. Wendell Kohler at the White House. Thank you very much. All right, you know, there's been another story going on here with all the defense activity, and that has been the Wall Street activity. A very strong day. The Dow Jones Industrial is up better than 235 points on a day that all things military have proven all good things for stocks. On the phone with us right now, one of the giants of the corporate world, Donald Trump. Donald, good to have you. Or I thought we had Donald Trump. I guess we do not. But we will get into this a little bit later here as we're looking at activity from the Fairford base. But there has been a great deal of talk about why the street has been up to the degree it has, about 1,000 points in 8 trading days. We've not seen 8 straight trading day advances since November 1996. For the week itself, the Monday through Friday period, this is the best performance we've had actually since 1982. But in the meantime, I want to go out on board the 332nd Air Expeditionary Force, where you'll find our Carlos Van Meek with the latest there. Carlos.
Yeah, you're looking live, Neil, at what the 332nd Air Expeditionary Wing has to offer. Behind me, if my photographer Paul Monge will go ahead and hone in on this, you have basically a farm of A-10s. Basically, this airfield has been a large part of what Operation Southern Watch was for a number of years. They've been flying sorties out of here for about a dozen. monitoring what was once the southern no-fly zone. But with Operation Iraqi Freedom in full swing, what you see in front of you are a variety of aircraft. These right here are A-10s with their sights set on a number of targets in Iraq. Those aircraft include F-16s, F-18s, Harriers, and of course these A-10s you see in front of you. Many of these aircraft are armed with laser-guided as well as satellite-guided munitions. So far, most of their efforts have been spent providing close air support for those Allied boots on the ground, as well as targeting key command and control centers. No word yet on how many sorties have been flown this 24-hour period, but last night about 144 sorties were flown from this base. It'll be interesting to see if those numbers spike tonight, being that things did kick off overnight. Also on this base, there's the premier combat search and rescue unit in this theater. So if a pilot were to go down during an operation, this is the base to call. We're expecting to get an update on tonight's operations in a few hours. And once we get that information, we'll go ahead and get that to you as soon as possible. Neil, back to you.
All right, Carlos, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Now, back to Donald Trump on the phone, who's sort of going to put today's huge market day and this incredible market week in perspective with these very big defense developments. Donald, can you hear me?
I can, Neil. How are you?
Good. Good to have you back with us. What do you make of just how Wall Street's been reacting to what our military guys have been doing?
Well, I think Wall Street's waiting to see what happens, but even before the fact, they're obviously taking it a little bit for granted. It looks like a tremendous success from a military standpoint, and I think this is really nothing compared to what you're going to see after the war is over.
What do you mean?
Well, I think Wall Street's just going to go up like a rocket, even beyond, and it's going to continue. And, you know, we have a strong and powerful country, and let's hope it all works out.
All right. Now, of course, we all want to be optimistic about it, including myself, Donald, but it has been a heady advance, 1,000 points in 8 days. There is a feeling out there that you're going to have some hiccups along the way and that it won't take much to undo this. Why are you so optimistic?
Well, I think a couple of things. I really feel that the key is interest rates are going to have to, beyond the war, interest rates are going to have to stay stable and low. That's going to be very important. And if you really look at Wall Street, Wall Street's come down thousands and thousands of points over the last number of 2 years.
Very good point.
So really there's, you know, a lot of way. I remember when we were sitting here saying 2 years ago that Wall Street was going to be double what it was 2 years ago, and a lot of people didn't believe that, and I didn't believe that, but there were plenty of very intelligent people that said yes. I think that Wall Street will be going up and the market will be going up, and there's great confidence in this great country.
You know, there is a feeling abroad, Donald, that the French don't like us, the Germans don't like us. There were protests still continuing around the globe today, from Asia to Africa, and that there's going to be hell to pay, that maybe some of these same people will prove their wrath by not investing in this country, by doing all sorts of nasty things. Do you buy that?
Well, I guess the French never liked us much except when we're bailing them out, you know, to be totally honest with you. But certainly we're going to have to work on our public relations because there's no question that there are a lot of countries in the world right now that aren't too fond of us. But I think that can be solved, and probably pretty quickly. The main thing is to get the war over with and just make it a tremendously successful campaign. And it'll be very interesting to see what kind of weapons they find.
Yeah, well, you're right there. But let me ask you finally about something you're very familiar with. That is the state of real estate, the state of the Big Apple. And in New York in particular, where security has been beefed up, where you find a lot of soldiers and a lot of policemen at the same time. Does this put a chill on things economically? Does it scare people into buying or not buying, renting or not renting?
Well, you know, in a nutshell, Neil, the office market is just okay at best. The hotel market is non-existent. But the residential market for buying for condos has been the strongest I've ever seen it. It's amazing. Now, a lot of that has to do, I believe, with interest rates. You know, money is so cheap and people are buying, and they're paying the lowest interest rates in 40 years. But, you know, the market has been very strong in that sense. There's a lot of optimism in New York.
And, by the way, the same kind of optimism you're talking about, if it really lifts stocks, it could hurt bonds, interest rates could go higher. You're not worried.
Well, that's right, and that would not be a good thing for real estate, as per your question.
Okay. Donald, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you,
sir.
Neil.
I appreciate it.
So long.
All right, Captain Dave Christian with us right now, our erstwhile contributor on all things military and a very brave man in his own right. Captain, what do you make of the campaign thus far? It's been remarkable.
It is remarkable to just capture your words there and to see that, you know, what's happening here. I think we're seeing leadership in action. The country, the United States of America, is demonstrating their confidence in the president, confidence in the leadership that we have. Tommy Franks over there, as Sir Donald indicated there, this confidence has gone for 8 straight days now. As you have indicated, the market is up. People are feeling good about the outcome of this. It's the first time something has happened assertively against terrorism and against something that's been, quote, unquote, evil or bad since 9/11. We haven't really done anything assertive, and people are saying this is the big step we're taking. We may put out a country that is the mother of all terrorism and if we've discovered these weapons of mass destruction. So I think we've taken the South in terms of the port cities. We've taken Basra, we've taken the oil fields, as you indicated. We've taken also 3 major airports. One airport as large as Heathrow International. We don't even need Turkey anymore. We can keep our $17 billion. We can fly over Jordan, and we can actually land our troops. The 101st is going in. We have a lot of things there, but one thing we have to indicate, or we have to establish, and you and I were talking about it earlier, is the fact that we've seen cattle, we've seen sheep, we've seen camels, but we haven't seen soldiers.
What is that about? I mean, here's the part of me that always gets, are we getting too cocky about it? I mean, it's looked almost too easy. You almost get the feeling as a trap being laid here. What do you think as a good military man?
I think that we have a contingency plan and we have to be prepared. We are going to see soldiers. We want to be cautiously optimistic. And I think that the White House knows, and they're setting it out right now. Please be cautiously optimistic. We've only had one casualty. It's called the KIHA, killed in hostile action, and the rest are killed in action, the ones that were killed on the aircraft last night in the middle of the night. So they were going to a mission there. So the military is a way of qualifying these.
And you like the way the president's been leading this campaign, right? He's kind of let his military guys make the decisions.
I like the way Wall Street likes the way, the investors like the way. For the first time, maybe the airlines and everybody else are going to have people fill these seats up, and we're going to have confidence.
Captain, hang in there. We're going to go now to Jamie Nelson aboard the USS Truman. Jamie, what's the mood like over there?
Neil, good afternoon. The mood over here is pretty good. Pilots, I can confirm today, are involved rather in strikes against Iraq tonight. Now, I can't go into any of the details about the timing or where strikes are being done by the pilots coming off of this ship, but I can describe to you what we know from publicly available information about Carrier Air Wing 3. That is the air wing embarked aboard the USS Harry S. Truman, and it includes F-14 Tomcats, FA-18 Hornets, and support aircraft such as S-3 Vikings, EA-6B Prowlers, and E-2C Hawkeyes, and a couple of other aircraft platforms here. Now, I can say that today, earlier today, I saw many of the weapons being brought up to the flight deck, being put aboard the airplanes, and those included various types of missiles. And, of course, the much talked about GPS-guided bombs, those precision munitions that we heard Secretary Rumsfeld praising earlier today. Those were brought upstairs up to the flight deck and attached by the ordnance crews there. Now, the Truman's been in the Mediterranean for 3 months now. And after watching diplomacy run its course and ultimately run out, many of the sailors and Marines here are glad that the waiting is over. Now, that's not to say anyone is pleased or happy about going to war. But many of the people I've spoken to, some of the aviators, they are eager to put their training and experience to work as they conduct their first combat operations in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Now, Neil, when we know more, we will, of course, bring that to you from the USS Harry S. Truman in the Eastern Mediterranean. Back to you, Neil.
All right, Jamie, thank you very much. Some breaking news now coming out of the Pentagon, where you'll find our Brett Baer. Brett, what are you hearing?
Hi, Neil. Yeah, we do have some breaking news, a little breakdown of what has happened so far. First of all, this 90 minutes, this barrage that we have seen inside Baghdad and across the country has included so far in between 1,000 and 1,500 precision-guided weapons. We can tell you that includes Tomahawk cruise missiles, as well as bombs dropped from B-2 stealth bombers and other platforms as well. The targets hit inside Baghdad include command and control facilities, communications facilities, state-run radio and television, Ba'ath Party headquarters, the Republican Guard troop positions around Baghdad, and also while Baghdad is taking a serious pounding, we can tell you that other targets, actually hundreds of targets across the country, are on the schedule and have been hit by all of these missiles that are landing. As far as what is going on from here, the ground operation continues. We can tell you that senior defense officials tell us that the ground operation actually started a little bit early, that the air campaign started as planned, and on time. As far as battle damage assessment, that is still ongoing, but they tell us the 90-minute barrage that we saw, the first strikes inside Baghdad that you saw live on Fox News Channel, are definitely not it tonight, Iraqi time, and we will see much more as some 3,000 targets are on the possible list to hit as this campaign in Operation Iraqi Freedom continues. Neil?
Brett, I'm just curious, the fact that they are saying there will be more hits tonight, how much of this is done in ways precisely with the hope of getting more of this decapitation going on, to get either the generals, top generals, or Saddam himself, if he's still alive, to call it quits?
Sure. They tell us they're not overconfident, but they are seeing significant signs within the Iraqi military regime that the structure is essentially falling apart. People in this building truly believe that Saddam Hussein was either severely wounded or is dead as a result of that first strike. They are not seeing any signs that he is still in control of the country. They can't say definitively that that's the case, but as far as command and control, they can say they're not hearing a lot of communication. What they emphasize is that they continually are trying to get these messages to top Iraqi military leaders, and they are talking, which is something that didn't happen just a couple of days ago. As you know, this regime, a lot of these people are answering at the end of the barrel of a gun. It's possible that the military leadership at the top is maybe not decapitated, but so incapacitated that some of these people are feeling free to talk about things, and they are seeing multiple surrenders. Neil?
You know, Brett, I was curious to ask you might have brought this up earlier, so I apologize in advance if you did. Some of the large bombs, so like one we were just showing video of, do we know whether the so-called Moab, mother of all bombs, was in fact used today?
We know that it is in the arsenal, in theater. We do not know and cannot confirm as of yet whether it has been dropped. We're trying to get that. The problem, it likely hasn't so far, because it has to be dropped from a C-130, which is a transport plane.
All right. Thank you very much, Brett Baer. Meanwhile, Chris Klein in northern Iraq, or Iraq, seeing some anti-aircraft fire as we speak. Chris, what can you tell us?
I'm standing in a position here some 20 kilometers away from Kirkuk, Neil, having visited earlier this forward outpost of Kurdish Special Forces. Now, over the course of the last 45 minutes, from our vantage point, north-northwest, I could witness heavy bombing landing on Mosul, and to the south, Kirkuk. I must say that it was an absolutely spectacular sight, if spectacular is the right word, because certainly a great deal of death and destruction has been raining down on Iraqi positions, anti-aircraft positions, and Iraqi armored units in those two cities that I mentioned. It's a pity we don't have the images to show you, because we were observing light security for fear as well of encountering friendly fire, or perhaps even provoking hostile fire from the Iraqis. We came under artillery and mortar fire today from Iraqi positions not too far away. It was more of an insult than a threat, since their rounds landed well short of our position, but still we felt it the better part of valor and had driven in here with the lights off with our night vision gear. What I would describe as the impact of the aerial bombardment, it seemed through our night vision goggles, it was like a constant pulsating beam of light, an absolutely devastating bombing going on. And as we...
Okay, we just lost Chris Klein. Kirkuk, by the way, one of those key oil hubs we were telling you about earlier. In fact, there are a swarm of them in that area that account for about a third of all Iraqi oil production, most of it centered in Kirkuk. So that, again, is very important to the coalition to get control of that area. And again, as the captain pointed out just a few minutes ago, all of this being done really without this issue of getting through Turkey, or having our bases or our guys go through Turkey. We've had access of airspace, but this has been largely done just really working within our own means here, which is something further remarkable. All right, joining me now from Capitol Hill is Republican Senator George Allen of Virginia, a key member, of course, on that Foreign Relations Committee, the guy who heads it. What do you think, Senator, of what you're seeing and hearing thus far?
I'm very happy. I'm glad that there's minimal loss of life to any of our troops. We've had a few casualties, which are unfortunate. I'm so proud of our technology community in our country. This is showing how technology from semiconductor chips to communications with these precision-guided missiles, they're hitting military targets, command and control targets, decapitating the leadership of Iraq while making sure that the people of Iraq realize we're there to liberate them and, of course, for Americans, make us safer by clearly disarming Saddam Hussein.
You know, Senator, as the Wall Street guy here, I find it interesting what Wall Street's done today, better than 230 points, and over the course of the last week, about 1,000 points. Here's the betting on Wall Street, Senator, that this is quick and easy and looking increasingly quick and easy. Is Wall Street getting ahead of itself?
It's good to be optimistic because we're winning right now. We're being agile, we're being flexible, we're taking what opportunities we can. It's key that we've gotten the port and secured the oil fields in the south. The north is still not secure because of the delays in getting any armaments really in any good numbers into northern Iraq, and the Kurds are helping there keep that at a standstill. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, but there's a lot of reasons still to be very cautious and alert and on our toes. We're working right now on the floor of the Senate to keep those tax cuts coming forward so that when the soldiers and airmen and sailors come back home, there's jobs here in the American economy.
By the way, how do those tax cuts look? I mean, from some of your more moderate members, I'm told that war or no war, they don't look too good.
Well, I'll give you some more good news, Neil, because I know you're an optimist. There were efforts to cut the tax cut package in one half, but nevertheless that was defeated. So it's still well over $700 billion, and that'll be good for families, for small businesses, for married people, and also for investors.
Senator, while I still have you here, this issue of Saddam Hussein, whether he's injured or even dead, how important is it, unlike the Osama bin Laden mystery, to get a confirmation that we either have him as a prisoner or he is dead?
It is unclear at this moment whether he's dead, injured, or alive. Regardless of if he's alive somehow, he's not communicating. The command and control has been knocked out with those first strikes right at the beginning. If he's not dead now, he soon will be dead because the noose is tightening around that hideous, vile regime.
All right. Senator, thank you very much. Senator George.
Stay positive for freedom, Neil. You're great.
Indeed, we will. Thank you, Senator. Always good chatting with you. All right, Steve Santani with the Navy SEALs right now, some folks who have sort of laid the groundwork for some of the big activity we're seeing today. Steve.
Well, Neil, the Navy SEALs and their boat crews carried off a very daring and very successful commando raid on Iraq's two main oil terminals. Now, these are 2-mile-long terminals where super tankers pull up and load up with Iraqi oil, part of the Food for Oil program. It's about 22 miles offshore from the southern Iraqi coastline. Now, we were able to ride along with some of the SEALs and their boat crews just last night, about 24 hours ago, as they went to their forward staging area. Then we climbed aboard the Cruiser Valley Forge, where the command center for this operation was located. And that's where we watched this whole thing come down. The Navy SEALs pulling their boats up next to this huge oil platform, this oil delivery terminal offshore, sitting out all by itself, 22 miles offshore. They climbed up the ladders, they took control, turned off the nozzles, and here's the main point. They wanted to prevent an environmental catastrophe. They didn't want Saddam Hussein to call somebody up and say, open the valve, spill 3 million or 1.5 million barrels of oil into the Persian Gulf, creating an environmental catastrophe. They averted that. They also didn't want him to torch the place, make a big flaming pyre out of it like he's done with so many oil wells and so many oil fields in Kuwait and Iraq. And they wanted to preserve it for Iraq's economic future, because since Iraq has the second largest oil reserve in the world, this is going to be vital to a revitalized Iraq in the future, to have this oil delivery terminal so the ships can come up there, pull up, and fill up peacefully at a facility that has not been damaged, torched, or otherwise destroyed by Saddam Hussein. So they came ashore and seized the valves, made sure that it was safe. They secured the area. There were some captives taken. There were 23 people aboard one of the oil terminals and 18 people aboard the others. These were all Iraqis, most of them civilians. They surrendered without any resistance whatsoever, and no shots were fired. When we went aboard this oil terminal, the main one that's been in use all these years, one of them is in disuse now, in disrepair. When we went aboard a couple of hours after this raid went down, those captives were still in a big room, laying down, being guarded by U.S. Marines, and they had their hands tied behind their backs, and they had hoods over them. There are about 23 of them. The U.S. officials are going to be questioning these people to find out what their intentions were. Here's what one of their intentions might have been. They were workers who were out there to try to rig this thing up to blow it up, because some explosives were found. A big box of explosives was found in one of the rooms there. They also had some small arms, some ammunition, some grenade launchers, all of these things discovered on this one big oil terminal. So they may have been out there to rig this thing to blow it up, and the Navy SEALs and their boat crews got out there just in time to stop it. After they secured the area, they left, and the U.S. Marines pulled in, and they're still there now, and those terminals are safe now in U.S. hands. Neil?
Very interesting, Steve, because we pointed out before at Kuwait at this stage of the game, by the time it was all over, you had 700 oil wells burning. So a very dramatic difference here, and reason why, by the way, oil prices dropped about another $2 a barrel. And that's, by the way, what we were looking at earlier, some of the last Gulf War oil fires in Kuwait. I want to update you as well on some other items coming into us. Turkey now is saying that its troops would enter northern Iraq to prevent an influx of refugees across its borders. It didn't give any new date for an incursion that so far the United States says that it opposes. So Turkey has proved more an impediment lately with the parliament course a couple of weeks back saying no to U.S. troops being stationed there, even though it did allow U.S. and coalition forces to use the airspace. Now they might complicate our own efforts to try to keep the calm in northern Iraq by threatening to come in and prevent a rush of refugees. I want to very quickly raise this with Captain Dave Christian. Turkey could be kind of mucking things up here.
It could be muddying the water. I mean, right now, Turkey wants to jump in. France also is sending overtures to the State Department and the White House saying they would like to help in the rebuilding, the contracts to rebuild Iraq. So all these folks that have muddied the waters and caused us great confusion are now following the shepherd and following the leader, so to speak, as sheep. So America is pulling something together that no one thought they could do. Was all these dire predictions.
And now everyone wants in.
And I can tell you as a field commander, as a combat field commander, what you want to see is war to be like a symphony orchestra. You want everything to hit at the same time, and you're seeing it on television. It's being played out. This is really historic. Historic in terms of the first time you're seeing live television with a short delay on the battlefield. I mean, you're not seeing any lies here. When that bullet is fired, you're seeing it reported back here to New York City, to Atlanta, to Philadelphia,
But the psychological reaction you talk about is very true, Captain, because we started out with, what, 21 members of this coalition. Most, of course, were not active participants. It then grew to better than 30.
Yes.
By this morning, we were talking better than 40. They're throwing everything with paper clips into this and said, all right, I'm in.
Everybody wants to jump on board.
Everyone wants to follow a winner. All right, now to the USS Constellation, where you'll find Kevin Monahan. Kevin, what's the mood there?
Dispatch.
Kevin, can you hear us?
I think we've just lost.
Okay. This is just my hour for this sort of thing. I apologize. Seriously, I have nothing to do with it, but it's been happening under my watch. But, you know, it's interesting, Captain, the kind of things we're seeing from all of our key stations, whether it's ships at sea or our guys in the north or in the south, that it is cohesive as far as the approach. It's not just sort of a shot-in-the-dark approach.
And what you're also seeing, you know, as commanders, we know Murphy's Law. You know, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong in the sense of these situations where, you know, we're seeing communication problems here. But they also have situations where they're going to arm a bomb, so to speak, and that bomb, they have trouble arming that bomb, or the bomb malfunctions, and there's little things that they have to take care of, which could be a critical situation. And we're so well trained and so synchronized, so much more so than the last Desert Storm 1.
Indeed. All right, now I think Kevin Monahan is good. If not, make a liar out of me. But Kevin, on the USS Constellation, can you hear us?
Kevin looks good.
Kevin does. He looks very good and he looks very calm. But we will go back to him when everything is working out. It could be something against Italian anchors. We don't know for sure, but we're keeping a very close eye on it. Meanwhile, Congressman Roy Blunt with us in Washington, making a sense of all of this as the majority whip in the House there. Congressman, this so far, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, as certainly Wall Street already has, is looking almost too good. What do you think?
Well, it does look good, and all of our predictions, all of our defense experts had said that we're so much better prepared in our force than we were in 1991 in terms of capacity, in terms of technology, in terms of our information about what we need to do, and able to pinpoint what we're doing. And frankly, we've thought them to be much weaker than they were in 10 years ago, and that appears to be the case so far. But with this regime, you're always under the fear that they will, as they have before, step outside the bounds of civilized society and use what kind of evil things they may have been able to put together against our troops in any kind of conventional environment. I think everybody's had some confidence that this would roll forward very quickly, and our concern's been about the non-conventional kinds of things that this regime has shown a willingness to use against its own people and against its neighbors.
Do you suspect, though, that they're sort of laying in wait for our troops to get into Baghdad? There's always that Mogadishu issue that I've raised with the captain in the past here, that another Somali on our hands, if we get ahead of ourselves here, we get into Baghdad, and all of a sudden we're targets, bombing or no bombing.
Well, we know as much about Iraq as we've ever known about any country. We've flown over this country for a decade now. The no-fly zones, we've had obviously our planes fired on over the years. One of the many violations of the UN edicts that Saddam Hussein hasn't lived up to. But we do know a lot about this country, including Baghdad. I think we know what we're putting behind us, and the way that we've been able to secure some of the oil fields and the riches of the country to help Iraqis rebuild their own country already is important. I think there's incredible disruption within the Iraqi military and their entire command structure. Who knows how that relates to Saddam Hussein and his family and intimate associates, but they clearly are disrupted. They're in disarray, and I don't believe that's a rope-a-dope kind of tactic to quickly see how fast we can get to the very heart of the country. If we're going to get there eventually, we might as well put all of this we can behind us, because I believe we're very thoughtful about the communication and the supply and all the other reasons you wouldn't want to move too quickly, Neil.
All right, Mr. Majority Whip, always a pleasure. I appreciate it, sir.
You bet.
Roy Blunt in Washington. All right, we've been telling you about stocks today. An incredible day, an incredible week. In fact, as weeks go, just Monday through Friday, we've not seen something like this in about 21 years when I was a much younger person. Also, we have not seen so many sectors advance on a day like this. So it was broad, it was sweeping, and it was convincing. Brenda Butner of Bulls and Bears fame and Terry Keenan, certainly of Cash It In fame, to sort of do the honors. Terry, of course, at NASDAQ. And where's Brenda? She's at Schwab, right? That's where she is. All right, Brenda, to you first. What do you make of just today?
Well, I think again, it was another amazing day. I think Wall Street is voting on this war, and it's saying it's short, it's going to be decisive. I mean, you saw that stocks basically rocket up when we went on to the new campaign, and they're saying, basically, good thing, President Bush, and let's get this over with. And as it's unraveling, we're seeing that it is almost over, and Wall Street says that's a great thing.
Wall Street also is noticing, Terry Keenan, oil prices declining. In fact, if my math serves me right, just over the last week, they're down about $12. That's going to show up in cheaper heating oil bills, going to show up in cheaper gas prices, and it's all been so quick. Maybe just like this war. What do you make of it?
Again, Neil, the parallels to 1991. Oil prices have fallen almost exactly the same amount, by about a third, as they did during the Gulf War in 1991. Now, that decline happened all in one day. This has happened over a week. The exact same thing is what happened with stocks. Everyone said when the bombs drop, we'll get a 1,000-point pop. Well, it took a period of 8 remarkable days on Wall Street, but we're up 964 points.
Brenda Butter, oil prices, and when they go down, they make a lot of people feel good. I mean, obviously the Northwest that announced big layoffs today, 4,900 workers are going to go. They've got to hope they keep going down because that's a big part of their business. But nevertheless, because of fears of Iraq, fears of the war, fears of a terror tit for tat, That's what's hurting the airline guys. Are they not going to participate in whatever improvement we're seeing?
No, I don't think there's much hope for the airlines. I mean, not only are they hit by the oil prices, but they've got this terrible labor battle. I mean, they've been, fighting with the unions for so long, and I just don't see. There's United, there's U.S. Airways, now there's talk of AMR going into Chapter 11. I think that's really tough. And also, just on the oil prices, I think we will see more lows. Remember, we were almost at $40 a barrel, and now we're below 25. And there are differences in the sense that at this time during Desert Storm, Kuwait was ablaze. The desert was ablaze.
That's right. People forget that.
At this point, though, the coalition forces have all of them under control. Oil prices can't help but go lower.
Okay. Brenda Butner, final word on the subject. Terry Keenan, thank you very much. Both of those ladies will be here tomorrow when we do a live Cost of Freedom on the impact of the war. Of course, you can watch that on Fox. And in the meantime, we were talking about these oil prices and what could send them a lot higher. Back, of course, in Kuwait, when we had better than 700 fields ablaze, that was a real problem. A man who played a key role in putting out a lot of those fires. In fact, he's rather legendary right now, Red Adair of Red Adair Enterprises. Red, good to have you.
Fine, thank you.
What do you make so far that we've seen only really, Red, a couple of wells affected, nothing like at least we had near the end of the Persian Gulf War a dozen years ago?
Well, I don't think they have that many going on. It doesn't seem like what I've seen on the news.
So you don't think it's a big problem so far? Nothing like it was back then, right?
I don't think it'll be near as rough as Kuwait right now.
Yeah. This is what we're looking at now. One of the wells that were affected, I believe, in northern Iraq, and I believe it's Kirkuk is what was affected.
Up there before.
What do you think of how different those wells are, Red, versus the ones that you knew about in Kuwait?
Well, I really don't know. But I can tell you, they got some awful big wells in Iran and Iraq, I mean.
So that they're more difficult when they're on fire?
Oh, no, it doesn't make, when we worked on it, it doesn't make us much different.
Okay.
See, the thing, you have to get rigged up to work on it. And by that, you have to have pumps and equipment to lift with to run it, pipelines. And then once you get it fire up where you want it, then you can see the equipment you're going to need to put on the well. But if you put the fire out too quick, you're going to have oil everywhere.
All right. Red, a real pleasure talking to you. Well, let's see if we keep this contained. Red Adair.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now back to Captain Dave Christian. This fire thing, in my little nerdy world of business, that's a big issue because if you get a lot of them going, and Iraq is a very big oil player, if it ever gets online to the rest of the market, the psychological effect could be devastating. What are we doing to prevent something like we had in Kuwait?
Before you saw the first sortie fly out the day before to cut the head off the evil man there, Saddam. We've had special ops in working with the Kurds, and I think it's Model in the north and the northern oil fields there. We've had in Jordan there, we have a big special op camp which helped us secure the oil in the west near Jordan, and also they helped secure the airfields there. And then the oil fields in the south now, as is indicated, are special ops along with the traditional conventional military moved in so fast, so with lightning speed. As a result, they didn't have the chance to ignite these oil fields. And I shared this before, that I did not think they were going to have the same tactics that they had in Desert Storm 1, because we knew what they did and we were prepared for it.
Yeah, but it was northern Iraq that surprised me. And of course, you were correctly teaching me this, that's where, of course, there's a concentration, Kirkuk, in other words, all these valuable oil wells. And now those are the ones I thought could be lit afire. And you were just saying, no, we've got a different strategy.
We have, and our strategy, the first thing is with special forces, just special forces in and of themselves. They go into a country, first they have to find the army. They raise this army, they have to train the army, and then they have to lead the army. So we've seen some pictures today where special forces are leading Kurds into securing certain fields, securing certain missions, and their mission and their objectives are there. So we're protecting the northern oil fields there. We're protecting the things. I think our biggest area is around Saddam's hometown, where he grew up. We're going to have concern there, any oil fields in and around that area. And we're also going to have a fight on our hands in reference to Baghdad. We'll have to see how the market reacts to that, seeing an actual exchange of bullets. It's passing cattle and camels doesn't scare anybody. But when we have an exchange of bullets and we go for the first time, the 101st or the 3rd Infantry or the 3rd Marines, we hit head on to a group.
But you're still buying the fact that this ends sooner rather than later, in days, not weeks.
I would say I'd like to see Baghdad surrounded Sunday, and I think we're going to have a standoff. It's going to be a Mexican standoff or a Panamanian standoff, like Panama City with Noriega.
Well, back then, we just played music, loud rock and roll music.
We played loud music. But we demoralized.
Yeah.
You know, the loyal troops to Noriega, they just faded away, peeled away, and we happened to be victorious.
All right. Thanks for your insight, as always, Captain Dave Christian. All right, just a reminder, I got John Gibson coming up next, but don't forget, we are live tomorrow. Actually, we're live throughout the night, live throughout the weekend, but part of our Cost of Freedom block tomorrow, taking a look at both the Wall Street, Main Street implications of all of this. The entire business unit team will be there, also utilizing our reporters around the globe. That's coming up tomorrow live, 10 to 12 Eastern Time, beginning at 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Now to John Gibson, who let's just see if he has any remote problems, but I doubt it because they like John. John Gibson now.
Shock and awe, the A strategy of raining down missiles on strategic targets in Baghdad underway to devastating effect. A 90-minute barrage today between 1,000 and 1,500 precision weapons, including 320 cruise missiles, which were launched from ships in the Persian Gulf and Red Sea. B-52 bombers took off from their bases in England hours before the bombs began to fall, and dozens of F-14 Tomcats and Hornet strike planes loaded with bombs flew from the deck of the USS Kitty Hawk. Baghdad was lit up. The center of Baghdad is now smoldering, and large mushroom clouds hang on the horizon. The question, will the thunder and destruction bring down the Iraqi military? There is already a benefit of this lightning attack that has been underway. There are pictures coming in from southern Iraq and northern Iraq of Iraqi soldiers surrendering, and as you can see, Iraqi citizens celebrating the arrival of the coalition troops. Massive surrendering underway now as the U.S. military says, in fact, much more than we can handle. Correspondent Todd Connor is live nearby in Amman, Jordan. Hi, Todd.
Hey there, John. Not sure if we just saw the shock tonight or there was a little awe mixed in there, but regardless, Baghdad really taking a beating tonight. Earlier tonight, a few hours ago, we saw huge fireballs, huge plumes of smoke rising from basically the central part of the city. On the receiving end of all of those cruise missiles, you had the presidential compound at the Old Palace. That includes an area for the Republican Guard. Also, at one time, several fires burning in and around this area. Also in this vicinity, we have offices of Saddam's staff as well as his cabinet. Now, flashes also seen to the west of there in an area that includes the main intelligence center and the Ba'ath Party headquarters. The actual devastation that these cruise missiles took on Baghdad, we may not be able to see until tomorrow, though. Meanwhile, what has happened to Saddam Hussein? Iraq continues to deny that he was wounded or even killed in the initial attacks on Baghdad a couple of days ago. Today, he appeared on Iraqi TV meeting with his cabinet, a meeting that apparently was recorded on Thursday. He looked a lot better than he did after the initial attacks on Baghdad. Iraq's information minister saying that God has protected Saddam and his family and that they are all safe. Meanwhile, Saddam putting a bounty on the heads of American soldiers as well as some of our airplanes. He's offering 25 million Iraqi dinars for killing an enemy soldier, 50 million for taking an enemy soldier captive, and he's offering 100 million Iraqi dinars if someone shoots down an allied plane. That works out to about 30,000 US dollars. John?
Todd, everybody wondering here, and so curious if anybody in Jordan is talking about it, the fate of Saddam. It's clear from the administration that the Iraqi leadership is in disarray. It is confused. It's not communicating well with its forces in the field, but still not clear whether Saddam is alive or dead. Now, I know you don't have any way of knowing in Amman, but what do people there think?
Well, I think a lot of people here would like to hold out hope that he is still in charge and he's still running things. On the other hand, you're going to have a lot more people probably who would like to see Saddam out of the way and perhaps a new regime taking over in Iraq so life could get back to normal. You have a couple of hundred Iraqi exiles here in Jordan who have lived here for some time, leaving Iraq because of a depressed economy and other reasons they fled. But I don't know. I think you'd get a mixed reaction from the people here on the street. Also, you know, you had the rumor that his son Uday had been killed in that initial strike. So just who is running Iraq, who's running the military, I'm not sure we're going to know that for some time.
No. What about the reaction there in Jordan to the shock and awe, the 1,000 to 1,500 precision weapons, including 320 cruise missiles? All of that went off in about 90 minutes. What were they saying? What were they thinking about that?
It happened so recently, John. I've been tied up in the newsroom all day, but I can tell you that there have been numerous protests here throughout the day, 2 days in a row, as a matter of fact, and things got a little bit violent today. A lot of people definitely do not want this war to happen. They don't want the U.S. to try to go in there and try to change the regime. They also don't want this war to happen because of the economic impact it will undoubtedly have on Jordan, because they do rely heavily on Iraq for a lot of trade. And of course, they get a lot of aid from the U.S. as well. You know, they were probably doing like a lot of us. They were probably sitting at home watching their TVs tonight, seeing how this shock and awe campaign actually worked out.
Correspondent Todd Connor live in Amman, Jordan. Todd, thanks very much. Navy SEALs taking on a crucial role securing 2 of Iraq's main oil terminals. Fox correspondent Steve Centani is with the Navy SEALs in Kuwait and was on the mission. Steve.
Yes, John, it was a very exciting mission, and it went down practically flawlessly. There were no shots fired. The Navy SEALs and their boat crews speeding up in the middle of the night, landing on these mile-long offshore oil terminals, storming up the stairs and taking captives. No shots were fired. Nobody was injured. There was no fire. There was no environmental catastrophe, and that's exactly what they were aiming to avoid. The whole purpose of this mission by the Navy SEALs and their boat teams was to get there before Saddam Hussein could order these people on these big, long oil terminals to torch the place or to open the valve and let millions of barrels of oil seep into the Persian Gulf, creating an environmental catastrophe. And preserving these facilities is also going to be important to Iraq's future, since Iraq is a very oil-rich nation. This is the main off-shipping point out in the ocean, out in the Persian Gulf, for all of Iraq's food for oil under their Food for Oil UN program. And it's the main shipping point if indeed Iraq in the future was allowed to ship freely commercially. This would be where most of the oil is loaded aboard the tankers on this offshore terminal. Now it's offshore, it's 22 miles offshore, connected by an underwater pipeline all the way from the southern shore of Iraq out to these loading terminals. So the tankers can come alongside, park, and then big hoses are lowered down, the valve is open, and their holds are filled with the oil from Iraq. So these have been preserved now by the Navy SEALs. Soon after they staged their daring commando raid last night, about 24 hours ago, the Marines came on board these big, long oil terminals. They're each one about a mile long, and they're about 7 miles from each other. They came on board and continued to search for any kind of explosives. Now, they did find some explosives on one of these terminals, a box full of explosives. They found some small arms and ammunition. They found some RPGs or rocket-propelled grenades. So there were weapons out there, and there were people out there. 23 people on the one main terminal and 18 on the others. They were all taken captive, and some of the U.S. military believed that these people were planning to rig the oil terminals to blow up. That's exactly what they were trying to avoid. Some explosives had been set, but it was not methodical. It was not professional. It seemed to be half-hearted, in the words of one of the Navy SEAls soon after this operation went down. Now, we rode out to the area with the SEALs from this base where I am now, and we went aboard the Valley Forge, which was the command center for the operation, and watched it come down in real time. Then a couple hours afterwards, after the terminal was totally secured, we got in one of the SEALs' little inflatable boats. Well, they're not little, they're about 30 feet long, and zipped out to the terminal itself, climbed aboard and took a look for ourselves. The captives were still in a big room, laying on their sides with their arms tied behind their backs and their heads covered with hoods. They were going to be questioned very, very thoroughly by U.S. intelligence and U.S. military in the days to come, and the U.S. will have to decide what to do with each and every one of those, whether they were innocent workers out there to help load ships, or whether indeed their intention was to blow this place sky high. But indeed, they surrendered without a fight, and no shots were fired. There was no explosion and no fire, and the Navy SEALs and their boat teams apparently averted an environmental catastrophe, protecting these main oil shipment points off the southern shore of Iraq. I'm reporting live with the Navy SEALs. Now back to you, John.
Steve Centani in Kuwait on a hair-raising mission with the Navy SEALs. Now, let's check in with Chris Klein, who's in the thick of it all in northern Iraq. Chris, what's happening?
John, I'm speaking to you from Kurdish Special Forces forward outpost, only about 5 kilometers away from Iraqi positions, and indeed only about 20 kilometers away from Kirkuk. So clearly we are well within artillery and mortar range. Indeed, earlier today we did come under some limited mortar and artillery fire. Now, from our vantage point over the course of the last 2 hours, looking south to Kirkuk and looking north-northwest to Mosul, we were able to see an intense aerial bombardment by Allied air power against what one can ostensibly presume, or rather likely presume, were anti-aircraft batteries and the Iraqi armor positioned around both of those vital cities. It was an absolutely fearsome display of aerial firepower. It would be perhaps best described as this constant pulsating light, very much like the center of a furnace. This tremendous incandescent light, and certainly, to be sure, a great deal of death and destruction was raining down on Iraqi military positions. We also saw intermittently and continue to see a fair amount of Iraqi AAA gunfire. We also witnessed a Iraqi surface-to-air missile launch. We, however, did not see the larger detonation, which would have meant that perhaps it had indeed struck the Allied aircraft that it had targeted. So most likely that SAM we saw fired did not reach the Allied pilot it had intended to bring down. This heavy aerial campaign that we've seen now seems to have stopped. It would also suggest that perhaps this is very pinpoint, indeed very accurate aerial bombardment rather than massive saturation bombing, perhaps likely meant to preserve rather than completely shatter the vital oil facilities that exist in both of those cities, as well as the vital airstrips that Allied forces hope to gain to build a bridgehead in the northern front, which very soon will come alive with both an effort by Allied and local Kurdish forces as they drive on both those cities. John.
Chris Klein in northern Iraq. Chris, be careful. Thanks a lot. Let's go now to where commanders are calling the shots. Mike Tobin, live at Central Command Forward Headquarters near Doha, Qatar. Hi, Mike.
Hi, John. General Franks, the head of the forces out here, has spent the day in a series of briefings. All of the top generals, we're told, are absolutely deluged with the amount of information that's coming from these rapid advancements and the historic events of the day as we have now entered the shock and awe phase. General Franks has sent a message out to the troops telling them that their objective is clear: to disarm Iraq, to liberate the people from a dictator who practiced oppression by means of torture, by murder, by hunger. Here is just a section of the letter that, or the statement that General Franks sent out to the troops saying, "You are now in harm's way. Our task will not be easy, but we're fighting for a just cause, and the outcome is not in doubt. I'm proud of you, all that you have done, and all that you will achieve in the days ahead." Let me also take you to some video that we now have in of the Royal Marines and the U.S. forces securing the Al-Faw Peninsula, really the southernmost point in Iraq. Something very significant they did there, similar to what you heard Steve Centani talking about with the U.S. Navy SEALs securing the oil terminal offshore. They secured the oil terminal on land there, preventing another environmental disaster if Saddam Hussein were to have given the orders to dump all of the oil into the Persian Gulf. itself. Also something that has been secured, or a town that's been secured, is Qasr. Very important because Qasr has a port. It will enable the coalition forces to start bringing in humanitarian aid. But there's a wrinkle in that plan. The Australian forces intercepted an Iraqi vessel which they say was loaded up with sea mines, those kind of mines that are attracted by magnetic fields and could blow a hole in a ship. Well, the British Navy has their mine countermeasures vessels out in that area, working the waters, clearing that area of mines and clearing that port of mines so they can start getting the humanitarian aid vessels in there. Very interesting vessels, these mine countermeasures vessels. They're made, the largest warships made of fiberglass. They don't have any metal on them that would attract a mine to them. They're made out of brass, copper, and fiberglass, and so that's their task right now. They're said to be very effective at getting those mines out of the water, clearing the way so the humanitarian aid vessels can get into that port and start getting aid to the Iraqi people. John?
Mike, two issues I'd like to throw out to you to see if you have any further information. Surrender talks. Obviously, this bombardment today was to try to get the elite Republican Guard to surrender. Is there any information on where we stand with surrender talks?
All that we're really hearing from that is coming out of Washington. You hear a great deal of optimism, a lot of hope coming out of the people in Washington. But here at Central Command, they really have the lid clamped down on any information to that effect coming out.
And they may have clamped down on this as well, Mike, but I got to ask, what's the word on the on Saddam, alive or dead?
Yeah, you got it. It's clamped down. All I can tell you is what we really hear from the press corps. And as you walk through, if you took a poll, I think half the people would say he's alive, half the people would say he's dead.
All right. Mike Tobin in Doha, Qatar. Mike, thanks very much. Now to Fox's William Lajeunesse, live in Kuwait City. The warning sirens sounded a little earlier there. What is going on now, William?
Well, John, right now things are quiet, but earlier tonight and today, of course, some more missile alerts. But I want to step back a little bit. This war, of course, is about many things, as Secretary Rumsfeld said, weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, but also liberation. And today, the small village of Safwan became the first Iraqi town freed from the grips of Saddam Hussein for 30 years. Safwan is the site, ironically, where General Norman Schwarzkopf ended the first Gulf War and where this one began. Tanks and troops secured Safwan early today. The townspeople greeted soldiers with cheers and handshakes, yelling slogans like, "Saddam, your days are numbered." This is a scene we do expect to see as city after city falls in the north and to the east to U.S. troops. Qasr, as Mike Tobin mentioned, is another that was secured today. The strategic objective of the Al-Faw Peninsula, shortening supply routes for military and humanitarian aid. Now, the Brits said they had initially hoped to secure Basra tonight as well. Now we are told they are basically going to surround the city, not necessarily enter it, but indeed attempt to engage the 3rd and 4th Corps of the Iraqi army. But many soldiers from Iraq are not even showing up, dealing with the conscripts. Several hundred have already surrendered. Others have deserted their posts, leaving their tanks intact. Some Iraqi soldiers simply pop up the white flag. Some are telling the U.S. that our officers are fleeing. Why should we fight? Also that this is a technological war that we cannot win. On to the Scud alerts. 3 more missile alerts in Kuwait today. 1 missile never made it. The 2 that did were intercepted. That brings the total to 6 incoming missiles destroyed by Patriot missiles, the Scud busters. At least 2 have been confirmed have been Scuds. That is a missile that Iraq says it does not even have, and that violates UN resolutions. Others, a mixture of medium and short-range missiles, the Al-Samud and the Ababil 100s. Another missile today that was intercepted landed just 10 miles from Kuwait City. Another intercepted in Iraq. Why is this important? Number one, it demonstrates they still, despite aggressive tactics by the U.S. fighters attempting to go after the mobile missile launchers, Iraq still apparently has a demonstrated supply of missile assets, also a willingness to use them. That is important because the commander in the south of Iraq is none other than Ali Hassan al-Majid. He is Chemical Ali, the man who used chemical weapons And the Anfal campaign in northern Iraq against the Kurds, as also the Shiites in the south and the Iranians in the Iran-Iraq war. Basically, at this point, the Scud hunt does continue because of their ability to carry WMD. UN inspectors said basically at the end of the last Gulf War, John, that there were about 50 Scuds and 25 warheads they believed had anthrax or botulinum. But the bottom line is that liberation appears to have begun with U.S. and British soldiers putting their lives on the lines for the Iraqis, and that has started. John, back to you.
William LaJeunesse, live in Kuwait City. William, thank you very much. Let's go now to Kevin Monahan aboard the USS Constellation. Kevin, can you hear me?
I can, John. Extraordinary day here on the USS Constellation. Flights continue to come and go. They've been going on for several hours now. The targets have included Iraqi positions of leadership, air defenses, military installations. Pilots are coming back with incredible stories of, they're just saying it was like a light show up there, something that they haven't seen before. Many of these pilots have been here for quite a while. This ship has been here, this carrier has been here for the last 4.5 months. It was here in '99. 50% of the pilots have flown over Iraq for several years now. They know it well. Still an incredible day. Tomahawks have been fired from what we are told, every ship in the area that is able to shoot Tomahawks, to fire Tomahawks off. Those include destroyers, cruisers, submarines in both the Gulf and the Red Sea. John, the mantra here is train like you fight, fight like you train, and I would imagine it's a pretty hard day to keep that in mind with all the adrenaline rushing through everybody's veins. But the pilots are coming back here very professional, very workmanlike, and they feel pretty good about what they've done so far, John. Back
Kevin,
to you.
have they reported to you anything about return fire? Are they getting fire from the ground?
I've spoken to a few pilots who have had some return fire. I have not heard from pilots saying that they've had a massive amount of resistance yet. It seems like there's certainly the few people I've spoken to are completely dominating the skies, but they have seen some fire while they were up there, yes.
Kevin Monahan on board the USS Constellation. Kevin, thanks very much. We will check in with you later. These powerful weapons we were watching today can make an impact long before they hit their targets. Having Tomahawk missiles and bunker busters in your arsenal affects military and even political strategy. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Krpinovich joins me from Washington. Dr. Krpinovich is the Executive Director for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments and Independent Research Policy Institute. So, Dr. Krpinovich, we heard from Brett Baer at the Pentagon just a little while ago, something between 1,000 and 1,500 precision weapons, including over 320 cruise missiles, were launched today at Baghdad and environs. What does that mean to you?
What it means is Iraq is really feeling the full force of the revolution in precision warfare. The number of Tomahawks you just mentioned in one day exceeded the entire Tomahawk firing that we did in the Gulf War. So in a sense, the compression of the intensity of these attacks is really rather remarkable.
Now, I talked about this capability affecting both political and military strategy. Explain that.
Well, if you look at our recent conflicts, going after Slobodan Milosevic in Yugoslavia, Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan, and now Saddam Hussein. In each case, our quarrel was not with the people of that country, but with the despotic leadership. Precision weapons allow you to go to war in such a way that you really minimize the prospects for collateral damage. That is, doing damage to innocent civilians or the infrastructure of a country, making economic recovery more difficult. So what precision gives you is that capability and also the ability to incredibly increase the intensity of your attack, because every bomb you're dropping is highly accurate.
You know, there was a feeling over the last couple of days, largely unconfirmed by the administration or the Pentagon, or for that matter, CENTCOM, that there was a kind of a conversation going on with certain Iraqi military leaders saying, look, you've got to surrender now or we're going to launch this. So what kind of message did 90 minutes of 1,500 precision weapons send to those guys who evidently have not agreed to surrender yet?
Well, the Pentagon calls it shock and awe. What it is an enormous display of firepower and capability. It's not just the flashes that these carrier pilots are talking about. It's the fact that everyone is, or just about everyone is hitting its target. In the old days when we had dumb bombs, you used to have to drop dozens and dozens of bombs to hit one target. Here, almost every bomb is hitting its target. So it's not only the display of firepower, but it's the fact that it's highly accurate and it's hitting what we're going after.
How is that going to help in the next few days as we try to neutralize or disable or disengage the elite Republican Guard that's reputed anyway to have the chemical weapons to defend Saddam Hussein? How do these weapons give us an edge there?
Well, the Iraqis have tried to effect what the military would call offsets to precision weapons. If you can be seen, you can be hit. So what they've done is they've gone underground, they've tried to make themselves more mobile, and that's where we have developed advanced precision weapons, for example, the so-called bunker busters. These are precision weapons that are highly accurate and yet can penetrate down 10, 20 feet of concrete to get the underground targets where these weapons of mass destruction might be stored, where Saddam or his commanders might be meeting. At the same time, as we saw in Afghanistan, we have developed these unmanned aircraft, these so-called UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, and we've now equipped them with precision-guided weapons as well. So in the case of where there's a target that's mobile, trying to stay on the move to escape detection and destruction, we're now getting better and better at that kind of targeting, the ability to pick up a mobile target and to engage it with precision weapons very rapidly. So the message to the Iraqi command and their leadership is no place to run, no place to hide.
You know, I should ask you about the Moab, the huge conventional weapon, 21,000-pound bomb. As far as we know, it hasn't been used yet, but it is waiting in the wings. What would you expect something like that to be used against?
I think you'd be using that against military targets in a fairly open area. It's called the Massive Ordnance Airburst Weapon. The military has a nickname for it. They call it the mother of all bombs. Essentially, it's 21,000 pounds, 10.5 tons. And what you have is what the military calls a fuel-air explosive. The bomb detonates, and what you get is an aerosol of essentially a fuel. It's ignited and creates this enormous overpressure that extends out to a radius of about 300 meters, so 3 football fields in every direction. What you're talking about here is a precision weapon in that we can drop it where we need to drop it, but certainly it creates a rather large effect. So you'd be looking at Iraqi troops in the open, this kind of force that's coming up against you.
Let's talk about Saddam Hussein. Evidently, he was in that bunker that was hit. 40 cruise missiles came in, as well as 4 2,000-pound bunker busters that were dropped by F-117 stealth fighter bombers. Even if he survived, the evidence is that he is not doing real well at communicating with his forces in the field. How can you use these weapons to cut off the leadership from its forces?
Well, not only do you have those kinds of weapons, but the U.S. military has developed weapons that go after your information or communications capabilities. In the Gulf War, for example, we saw the use of these precision carbon filament bombs. They're cruise missiles or aircraft that essentially drop a weapon. It's got a canister in it. It displays out spools of carbon filaments. They hit power lines. They short out your electrical systems, and in a sense, you can't communicate. There are other weapons, precision weapons, that are in development that are called E-bombs. These bombs or missiles, when they detonate, create an electromagnetic pulse, a huge surge in electrical current. They get into electrical systems like computers, cell phones, and so on, and short them out. So if you don't get Saddam Hussein, the next best thing is denying him the ability to communicate with his commanders. And certainly what we're seeing right now is a dysfunctional Iraqi command structure. And it would seem that if we didn't get Saddam, we certainly have made it very difficult for him to communicate.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Karpinovich joining us from Washington. Dr. Karpinovich, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Our British sister station is one of the few news organizations still reporting from Baghdad. Sky News' David Chatter describes what it was like during the shock and awe bombing.
Okay, well, those are very large bombs. Those must be the 1,000-pounders. I think the citizens now of Baghdad know exactly what the Pentagon means by shock and awe. A huge, intense barrage of missiles and bombs aimed at the heart of the city to dislodge, dislocate, and paralyze the command and control structures.
David, I've been to one or two war zones with you over the past few years, but I have never seen anything of that intensity that we witnessed tonight.
The first two nights were nothing compared to this. I've never seen anything like it myself, Chris. What I could see of it, and I heard most of it taking shelter. You see the flashes come and they're uncomfortably close, and you dive down behind your sofas and take cover. And I can't tell you exactly the targets, but they're narrowly focused, aimed, of course, at command and control centers and trying to paralyze the strategic infrastructure of the country. But after tonight, we've tasted exactly what high-tech modern warfare can do to a city.
That, of course, is David Chater of Sky News. A night of fire. This is the first video of Saddam's palace in Baghdad. It comes to us from Iraqi TV. We've been talking about the 40-some-odd cruise missiles that hit it, as well as 4 big 2,000-pound precision-guided bombs. This video aired on Iraqi TV is showing the damage, which is quite extensive, as you can see. And this, in fact, is our first glimpse of Saddam's palace in Baghdad. If I'm correct, the one that was hit on the opening night of hostilities as the Iraqi leadership was targeted. We're going to get some more of that video together and show it a bit more of it to you a little bit later, so stay with us. A night of fire from the sky in Baghdad, and still no clear indication of who's in charge in Iraq or who is in control of the military. Major Garrett has a live update now from the Pentagon. And Major, we were just looking at that video. Quite a little mess in the Saddam Palace.
Well, and it's worth pointing out, John, that all of the palaces, and maybe you have the number, I can't remember how many there are, 17 or 18 Saddam presidential palaces, they are all actively on the target list. And if they haven't all been struck by now, they soon will be, for a couple of reasons. They've long been on the target list, and they've long been suspected sites of weapon of mass destruction, which is a crucial component of the campaign the coalition forces are waging against Iraq. But let's go to the central question that has been uppermost in the minds of planners here at the Pentagon, at Central Command, and throughout the U.S. intelligence community. Is Saddam Hussein alive? And if he is he in any type of control over Iraq and its military? There are no declarative statements on this. There are no definitive answers. Oh, I'm sorry, John. I'm tossing back to you. Forgive me.
Major Garrett, we're going to go to Mohammed al-Duri, the Iraqi ambassador at the UN, for just a moment. Let's listen to the Iraqi ambassador.
Withdrawal of the oil for food program workers resulted into preventing the program from providing essential humanitarian needs for the people of Iraq. The withdrawal of the concerned UN agencies halted the work of these health and development agencies in Iraq. The withdrawal of ANMOVIC and IAEA inspectors halted the work of the 2 agencies, which was essential not only to complete verifying Iraq as free of weapons of mass destruction, but also to implement other requirements of Security Council resolutions connected with the completion of inspections, and atop is the lifting of the unjust embargo on Iraq. The Secretariat General on 19 March 2003 submitted a draft resolution to the Security Council claiming making amendments to the oil for food program, while in fact it is an American-British draft resolution aiming at A, the cancellation of the Security Council Resolution 986 on 1991. B, the cancellation of the Memorandum of Understanding signed between Iraq and the United Nations on 20th of May.
As Mohammed Al-Duri is speaking, we are also hearing in the background what sounds like firing over Baghdad. Let's listen to Mohammed Al-Duri.
And rights among people, and the principle of equity and sovereignty between states, and the principle of respect of territorial integrity and independence of states, and the principles of non-interference in the internal affairs of states. D, the draft resolution will transform the Secretary General of the United Nations into a High Commissioner dealing with Iraqi funds available in the Iraqi fund established from the sale of Iraqi oil, and allocate some of those funds for activities not related to the humanitarian program, but to activities of political and intelligence nature. What it draws regret and deploration is the fact that the Secretariat General submitted this draft resolution on the same day the United States and Britain committed their cowardly colonial barbaric attack on the people of Iraq on 19 March 2003. It is a flagrant material breach of the international law, the UN Charter and the Security Council resolutions relevant to Iraq, all of which emphasize respect of Iraq's sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity. What also draws regret and deploration is that the Secretariat General did not make any statement condemning or deploring this attack, and the Secretary General did not, in accordance with Article 99 of the Charter, namely the submission of a letter to the Security Council alerting that the attack threatens international peace and security with the gravest of dangers and threatens the fate and the future of the United Nations at the heart. The American-British draft resolution carried with deep regret the signature of the Secretary General, which calls for the forfeiting the role of the Iraqi state in implementing the Memorandum of Understanding, and is based on a despised racist colonial illusion that moves the tyrant despots in Washington and London, and that is the removal of the state of Iraq from existence and transforming Iraq and the region into colonies under the control of the world American and Zionist oil mafia. The government of the Republic of Iraq rejects the deplorable draft resolution submitted by the Secretariat General of the United Nations on behalf of the governments of the United States and Britain, and considers it a great insult to the United Nations and its Secretariat General, and a great disservice to the credibility of the international organization. In conclusion, I would like to warn that the deep crisis facing the United Nations today, due to the American-British invasion of Iraq and the failure of the United Nations in keeping the collective peace system based on the principles of the Charter, will deepen even further if the Secretariat General of the United Nations did not take appropriate measures to follow to the letter the implementation of Article 100 of the Charter, and specifically paragraph 1 of this article, which states, the Secretary General and the staff shall not seek or receive instructions from any government or from any other authority external to the organization. I thank you very much.
Are you calling the Secretary General to resign, Mr. Ambassador?
Thank you.
Mohammed Al-Duri lodging the mother of all objections against the United Nations. Meanwhile, let me go back to Major Garrett. Major, we were talking about Saddam Hussein. And we're talking about the chances he could be alive, the chances he could have been either injured or killed in the attack a night or two ago. What is the evidence either way?
Well, here are the inferences being drawn, John, in the intelligence community and here at the Pentagon, and they are educated inferences based on a few evidentiary facts. First of all, fact one, they have excellent and high degree of confidence that, in fact, Saddam Hussein and his two sons, Uday and Hussein, were in the compound struck Wednesday night with the precision-guided Tomahawk cruise missiles. Fact number two, there have been no live television appearances of Saddam Hussein since then, and until this latest wave of the aerial bombardment from coalition forces began, meaning up until 12:30 Eastern time today, he had every live television or radio capability to tell and explain and show to the world that the coalition had in fact not struck him, had not injured him. He did not avail himself of that opportunity. He put himself on tape. There is a clear indication in the intelligence community that is his voice, but there is a great deal of suspicion of whether or not that was taped long before hostilities began. Third piece of evidence, there is a tremendous sense here at the Pentagon that the command and control structure from Baghdad to the commanders in the field has almost completely broken down. Fact number four, emergency medical equipment was rushed to that compound, and there is a very high degree of confidence, almost near certainty here at the Pentagon and without the larger intelligence community, that at minimum Saddam Hussein was injured, quite possibly very seriously, and it is this preponderance of evidence that leads them to draw the inference, not the declaration, no definitive statements, John, but the inference that at minimum Saddam Hussein was hurt and quite possibly killed. Now, what does the defense secretary say about it? Well, he has put all of these things together, but as yet, being very cautious, as he knows this is the most critical component of this campaign, he's willing, for now, to withhold absolute comment. Here's how he phrased it at the briefing at the Pentagon just a few hours ago.
I hear scraps of information, and you can be certain if I had a sufficient number of scraps that it began to make a persuasive case, that I would opine on it.
There you have it, John. Scraps of information. That's what they're all working on. And here's the real problem. And it's not necessarily a problem, it's just a fact problem. The people who are nearest that compound that was struck, where the intelligence community and the Defense Department believes Hussein, Uday, and Saddam all were, are not on our side, at least not yet. So the people plowing through the rubble are not exactly giving the most accurate information back to the larger U.S. and coalition community. Eventually that will happen, and then we'll all know the absolute truth. John, back to you.
You know, Major, we've got a picture of Baghdad up, and we're hearing various sounds, some firing, what sounds like air raid signals. Is there an expectation? Major Garrett will rejoin us a little bit later. As you can hear, air raid sirens in Baghdad, and I guess we should expect that the campaign of precision-guided weapons and cruise missiles will go on for a little while. Let me read you something else that we just are learning here. Terry Schultz, our Fox producer at the State Department, inquired of the State Department what kind of reactions they're getting from Arab and Muslim countries now that the assault is fully underway. And the State Department officials say they're getting the exact response they wanted, which is dead silence. No one is saying a word against it, this official said, adding that those governments are also controlling anti-war street demos and not fanning the flames of anti-Americans, as sometimes has been the case in the past. So, from Arab and Muslim nations, the response the American government would like, which was dead silence. It's early in the campaign, but not too early to ask how it's going so far. Are there any adjustments to be made on the fly, or is everything going according to plan? With some analysis, Fox military analyst, retired Major General Paul Vallely, joins me from Washington. So, Paul, I can ask you, General, excuse me, I can ask you what I was going to ask Major
John.
Garrett. More bombs tonight? More cruise missiles tonight?
John, I think what we have now is a lull. They're going to set back. They're going to look at the campaign plan and then make any adjustments.
So what would be the adjustment that would seem logical or obvious to you?
Well, you know they had a target list, so they would have hit those targets in a phase 1 operation. When they go to the second tier or the next targets, then they would look at which ones they will take out and on down the list until they're completed to their satisfaction.
Well, so if you've got the screenwriter handy, give me some pictures of what we might anticipate or what we've just seen in the last few hours.
John, great. Let's go to the screenwriter. I want to highlight the river valleys here, the Tigris and then the Euphrates. And now let's go to a Fox flyover, John, so we can see exactly what our soldiers will be looking at on the ground as they move up towards Baghdad. That is the Euphrates River going from south to north. Now, our forces, for the most part, will go to the left side of the screen or to the west as they come in and enter Baghdad.
Now,
let's now go to the next Fox flyover. Go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
Okay, we're going to show now coming up on a presidential palace, John, much like the one that was taken out in downtown Baghdad today. And so in that regard, John, they have bunkers underneath those palaces, command and control headquarters. So if they use those big 2,000-pound bombs on those, they devastated those palaces. Let's go now to the next Fox flyover, which is going to be a communications site as we go in here. Now, Special Security Organization was headed up by Qusay, Saddam's son. That gives you a look-see at a communication site that probably was on the primary target list, John. Now, that gives you an idea of the terrain over there, what the environment is, and what it looks like to our soldiers, not only flying in helicopters, but from the aircraft and then on the ground shortly as we move towards Baghdad.
You know, Paul, there were a lot of people who thought the reason that the shock and awe went off today, not only was it scheduled, not only was it planned, but the Republican Guard did not surrender. From your experience in these matters, I know you dealt with Panama and others, what is going on right now in the negotiations to try to get those Iraqi divisions to lay down their guns?
John, about 2 hours ago, I received a call from the Middle East. There are no communications that are coming out of Baghdad, the headquarters, to the outlying Republican Guard units, as well as the Special Republican Guard, which may be outside the limits of Baghdad. Now, you remember before we had intelligence that he pulled his Special Republican Guard back in around Baghdad, but nobody's communicating with each other now. They're not picking up any traffic at all. So this indicates that that command and control structure, John, has been disintegrated to a great degree. So whatever's left in Baghdad, as we approach, we'll find out what's there based on current intelligence, and then we'll take the necessary steps to tweak the campaign plan in order to have that entire regime collapse from within. I think that's what they're working on.
All right, Paul, now very quickly, months before this started, you told us they have the cell numbers of all those generals commanding all those divisions, and they can call them and start talking to them. Am I to assume that that is going on as we speak?
Well, of course, when we put that out, John, maybe Saddam took all their cell phones away, but I doubt it. We've been talking to them, we've had their numbers, we've even been emailing them. That is part of the psychological operations campaign, John, and this is the most effective PSYOP campaign ever conducted by any army in history. And I think that's why you'll see a disintegration of all of those units at some point in time as the forces approach Baghdad.
Major General Paul Vallely joining us from Washington. General, thanks very much. Joining us now, Fox News producer Carlos Van Meek, traveling with the 332nd Air Expeditionary Wing. Carlos, what can you tell us?
The only guaranteed way is to hang up and try again. No guarantee we'll get up in 20 minutes.
Carlos Van Meek, we're having a little trouble. Carlos, can you hear me? All right, Carlos Van Meek with the 332nd Air Expeditionary Wing. They're apparently moving and doing something. He couldn't hear us. We will get back to him shortly. The Bush administration has made it clear it has nothing against the Iraqi people. To make sure they get the message, more than 17 million leaflets have been dropped on Iraq. Radio messages are also being broadcast around the clock. It's all part of a campaign to win over the hearts and minds. Nancy Snow is the author of Propaganda, Inc. and an assistant professor at California State University, Fullerton. She joins us from San Francisco. Now, this is, I suppose there's some propaganda involved, but this is more of a campaign, I believe, Ms. Snow, isn't it, that they're just trying to get these people to understand what we're up to and to get them to welcome us rather than try to fight us.
Well, and I just heard your last expert say that this is the most successful PSYOPs operation that any military has ever undertaken. And that could very well be true. There's still a lot that we need to find out about this story. The shock and awe campaign may be a short story, but really winning hearts and minds of the Arab street, if you will, may be a longer story.
Okay,
and as you just reported,
before we get down to the Arab street, let's address the generals and the leadership that we're trying to convince it's over for Saddam Hussein. What are the hallmarks of a good PSYOPs operation directed at those kinds of people?
I think what the U.S. government has been doing with leaflet dropping for weeks, combined with the international broadcasting, President Bush's message to the American people was also translated simultaneously to the Iraqi people. And it's important that they hear that message, that if indeed this is about liberating the Iraqi people, that it's made clear to them that these targets, these military targets, are designed to minimize casualties, civilian casualties, and that the soldiers, including the Republican Guard, have an option to give themselves up and to save their lives, because it's clear that Saddam Hussein's regime is on the outs from what we've been hearing in the last hours.
Let me ask you about we have seen quite a few Iraqi soldiers surrendering, and we've seen some jubilation in the street. And today when I was watching Al Jazeera, I saw Donald Rumsfeld's news conference being carried live to the Arab world and being translated in Arabic so they could understand what he was saying. Does that have an effect, or when they see the Secretary of Defense of the United States, do they just not believe him?
Well, I think the issue of credibility is an important one. And while I think the Secretary of Defense, Rumsfeld, can be an effective speaker, he may not be the only speaker we have to present the message of America to the world. Colin Powell is certainly one of probably the most credible of our international statesmen. That's why he was sent up to the UN for the last show and tell of what the Iraqis were hiding in terms of weapons of mass destruction. But John, it's really important that we have other voices out there, not just voices of dissent, but also voices from the American people communicating directly with the Arab people and the Muslim people, and hopefully with the Iraqi people as much as